Hello! Welcome to Pint of a Story with me, Shobit. In this podcast, we bring you pint-sized stories from indie authors such as myself that you are likely not to have read before. Links to where the stories live on the internet will be in the show notes or description, and we do encourage you to click on them and read the stories for yourself. Hope you enjoyed today's story, and if you do, please share it around and subscribe if you like.
Tales of grandeur, immoral and pure, greed and secrets, passion and glory. The pulse is rising, the plot's surprising. You captivated, that's the point of the story.
Yes, that indeed is the point of the story, and this week's story is called At Paradise Cafe, written by Sonam Sahu and first published in November 2020 on penmancy.com. This marks our very first story in collaboration with penmancy.com, who we deeply care about as they believe in getting indie stories out to the world as much as we do. Do visit their website, that is penmancy.com, also linked in the show notes. Your feedback or comments really matter, so please leave some. Hope you like this one. Here goes. A lot had changed in all this time, yet a great deal seemed to have stayed the same. Manvi had not stepped on this ground in almost a decade. The surreal moment of standing on the single-track platform did nothing to justify the ambivalence she had undergone before deciding to make this trip. She didn't even have to look around the railway station to know her next move. There was just one way to exit, albeit one could enter from anywhere considering the platform was open on all sides. To call this a railway station would be an overstatement. The flimsy shed under which she stood was the only accompanying infrastructure. No discernible ticket counter or even a single seat waiting area. Stepping out, her hometown glowed under the nascent sun, peeking over the emerald blanket that surrounded the place. A gentle breeze, drenched in petrichor and carrying the faraway early morning buzz of a bustling rural life, caressed Manvi's cheeks. Her mind coaxed her thoughts against her wishes to feel the nostalgia which the familiar streets evoked. She had been so sure she had left her past life in the past that the onslaught of old memories felt like a deluge. Once long back, her 4-year-old self had strolled down this very street with a skip in her step, hanging on to her father's big, buffed-up arms. "Manu, it's you, right? Oh, child." An elderly, slightly hunched lady ambled towards Manvi and hugged her tightly. "I told your uncle that you would come this time. How well have you grown? Your father would have been so happy." Manvi flinched on the inside at the mention of her father, while the lady sniffled and wiped up her welled-up eyes with the end of her sari. "Auntie, so good to see you. I will swing by your house tonight. Let me settle down first." "Of course, child. I will make your favorite food. You have to stay for dinner." Before Manvi could protest, she had shuffled away. The favorite food Auntie remembered was not her favorite anymore. Indeed, time seemed to have stopped here. At her house, she found the front door unlocked. She left her backpack at the entrance and explored around the dwelling. The faded green walls of the rooms, once vibrant, had now turned lackluster, proof that time had passed by. Manvi found most things at their designated places in the house, owing to her perfectionist father. She dusted and cleaned the house, took stock of grocery in the kitchen, and unpacked her belongings she had brought with her. After changing into a fresh set of clothes, she made her way to the bank. In the evening, she strolled across the market to get a few essentials to last her through the intended week-long stay. Her feet, out of old habit, took her towards the fairgrounds. The Friday fair was in full swing, with children of different ages frolicking within the enclosure, some vendors shouting at the top of their lungs to attract customers, while others haggling with the potential buyers. Manvi could not stop a smile from curling her lips, as her dusty memory and the pandemonium in front of her coincided. She was amazed at the clarity with which she remembered her father's stall at the far end of the fair with his handmade clay oven. She used to get entrusted to tend to it, although her 6-year-old mind would long to join the other kids in the fair. Manvi quickly left the place before someone could spot and hold her back, her toned-down city clothes being a dead giveaway. Later at the uncle's house, Manvi took a breath of relief as she noticed the first signs of modernization her uncle had adopted to upgrade his living quarters. "Do you remember my son? He did all of this for us. That's why it may feel like a city house to you." Manvi just smiled and nodded at her aunt. "How have you been, child? Didn't you miss us at all? I would always ask your father to call you, but every time he just said you were busy. And now..." "I'm sorry, uncle, for not calling. But father was right. I was very busy with studies and my part-time job, and then later just surviving the corporate life. And it wasn't possible to call that often on landline." "I can understand. Our son says the same thing and hasn't visited us in so many years. We haven't even seen our granddaughter." After dinner, Manvi reflected on her long-lost past. 4 a.m. Noise of firewood snapping in the crackling fire. Sweet, smoky smell in the air. An incessant bout of coughing. That is how I would begin my day ever since father decided to start the bread-making business. Baking, particularly bread, wasn't popular in those days, especially in our remote, sparsely populated village. People would rather have homemade hot chapatis than buy a loaf of cold bread to heat it again before eating. However, father once saw a baking facility in the big city and it was love at first sight. That had been my reaction as well when I first tasted his freshly baked bread. That white, fluffy cloud encased in a brown, cracked, crusty outer layer. "Father, I could eat this all my life." "I believe you, my bread fairy." The sobriquet which father had given me fueled the sandcastles that my 4-year-old mind had built. Bread fairy. We had one handmade dome-shaped clay oven at home and another at the fairgrounds, and a fire needed to be kindled in them all day long to maintain optimum temperature. That's what Ma would do early in the morning before the first batch of baking commenced, while father was busy in the kitchen. Some days, Ma's coughing was so severe that I had to take over the task of tending to the flames, while she rested. It seemed like a fun activity for a 6-year-old back then. I would help her with other morning chores of cleaning, dusting, and preparing breakfast and lunch before heading off to school. I loved studying. I dreamt of having my own house in the big city, getting Ma examined at a big hospital and setting up a fully automated bakery for father. I didn't have many friends through my formative years because, at the time, they would play and have fun, and I would mostly be helping around. Like father, I was fascinated with baking. The evenings would see our family engrossed in making dough. We had to knead, prove, and rest the dough for hours so that the yeast could work its magic. I would feel intoxicated by the smell of freshly baked bread. That year was monumental for us, since father took the risky decision of letting his fairground lot go and renting a small cart and a tiny space beside the highway. It used to take me more than half an hour to reach the place by foot, but father was sure this would prove pivotal for his business's future. He had not been wrong. I spent my weekends at his new workplace. The truckers and travelers would find their humble bread and butter perfect for snacking. I met many people from the city and my fascination towards it grew. With time, father got more adventurous and set up a small, tin-roofed shop at that place. He had also started to experiment with his baking techniques and was now making sweet, cream-filled buns. At home, I noticed Ma getting sicker by the day. She would not let me tell father about it. I didn't understand her reasons, but I obeyed. Something I would regret forever. Father got more and more preoccupied with his expansion of now flourishing business and had no time left to devote at home with us. His dreams began to resonate with mine, the elusive big city and our own place there. For me, he was my hero, a visionary. He took up an otiose craft and kept at it until he succeeded. He was my hero until he was not. Next morning, Manvi stood in front of a small, cozy shop named Manu's Paradise. She still couldn't believe that her father had selected this cheesy name for his bakery. An estranged memory made its way to her thoughts before she could cross the threshold. Here it is. This is going to be ours next week. Need to fix it up a little. Her father had proudly showed off a small, dingy room with a partition towards the back. The paint was peeling off, and the roof looked like it would cave in any minute. Don't worry, this is going to turn out perfect after a touch-up. 8-year-old Manvi was thrilled by her father's excitement and had declared this would be her paradise. Her parents were elated at her proclamation. That would prove to be the last happy picture of a family together. Manu, child, what have you decided? Her uncle's question brought her back to the present. Uncle, I didn't think he would give me this shop. I haven't thought of the future yet. Okay, think it over. In case you decide to sell, I can help you find potential buyers. Sure, uncle. That evening found Manvi perched on a high chair at the shop's counter, where she was guessing her father must have sat while attending to his customers. A week's worth of dust had settled over the counter and the shelves. The stale breads and rotten confectionery left clean patches after she got rid of them. As soon as her uncle left, Manvi set about cleaning and scrubbing the whole shop. She was fervently scouring the whole place down as if to get rid of her father's traces. At the back of the shop stood a huge industrial oven, which she knew was her father's prized possession. Dusting around this area, she came across a thick, hardbound book, pages upon pages filled with recipes, noted in her father's handwriting. She felt unreasonably annoyed, imagining him sitting and noting each recipe patiently when he couldn't even write a single letter to his daughter. Stashing the book in the cupboard where she had found it, Manvi locked up the shop and made her way back to the empty house. She remembered that day, at dawn, when she ran as fast as her 12-year-old legs could carry her. Uncle, open up. Something is wrong with Ma. She won't stop coughing. He rushed outside, hurriedly putting on his shirt and ran alongside her. An hour later, it became clear that her mother would never wake up. If only I had run faster. If only I had woken up sooner. If only father had been here. He wasn't. He had gone to the city the previous night. His plans of having his own bakery there was finally taking shape. There was no way of informing him about what had happened. Her uncle had to initiate all the rites and rituals until he returned. While she had been bawling her eyes off, his reaction was a blank look and silence. The silence that would come to reign over their home and their lives. He did not apprise her of the reason, but he never spoke of moving to the city again. He had become a stranger to her and immediately buried himself completely in his work. She, on the other hand, submerged herself in studies and household chores. Therefore, it wasn't a total surprise when her father immediately agreed when Uncle Jay from the city suggested to take her in for high school and further studies. While her dreams of living in the city had started to come to life, she didn't notice her father's stifled aspirations. Or perhaps she chose to ignore them. She was more than eager to leave this place, where everyone knew everyone's business. She wanted to run away from the pitying look in everyone's eyes. The city was everything that she had expected, and so much more. After schooling, she took up a part-time job at a coffee shop close to her college, as she did not want to depend on her father for her daily allowance. He had paid for the tuition and other sizable fees anyway. When she landed a job, her reasons to head back dwindled further. She never received a single congratulatory message from him for any of her accomplishments in life after she had left. She knew that he was aware of them because Uncle Jay informed him every single time. An unsaid agreement seemed to prevail between him and her. He understood she was doing fine without him, and she knew he was faring well without her. They were good at their own junctures in life, happiness no longer a priority to either. Things remained as such until she got news that he had collapsed at the shop and did not make it. After a long exchange of emails with her manager, she managed to get a week-long leave, but missed his funeral. Now, while she reminisced some of those things and regretted others from her past, in the shop, she sat at the counter with her father's recipe book on a fresh morning with him gone. Her mouth dried as her eyes caught what was scribbled in a corner of a page. Cake for Manu on her graduation. Her fingers trembled as they flipped the pages in urgency to find if any other similar scribble existed. For Manu's 18th birthday. For Manu's job placement. There were many more such side notes throughout the book. She realized now that she held in her hands her father's Meraki. The silence which sealed between them over the years was essentially them conversing with each other all this while, like her letters to him that she never sent, stored in a cupboard back at Uncle Jay's house. Manu, I went to your house but you weren't there. What are you doing here? The tiny bell on the top of the door jingled. Manvi came out from the back of the shop to find her uncle and two more men from the neighborhood standing at the entrance. Sit down, uncle. Taste this and let me know what you think. She brought a plate with 3 pieces of vanilla frosted cake neatly placed on it. You made these? That's what you've been doing since morning? Manvi simply gestured for them to try the pastries in reply. Manu, this is delicious. Wow, they're really good. Manvi beamed at them as her uncle stared at her in bewilderment. Her demeanor had changed completely overnight. He was even more surprised at the fact that she seemed to be better at baking than her father. The pastries proved it. And try this too. She rushed to the back and returned with 3 cups balanced dexterously in her hands. Coffee? Yes, uncle, she proudly answered as the 3 gentlemen marveled at the humble latte art she had created. 2 years at the cafe working part-time, she had picked up a trick or two. I have a feeling you've already made your decision, Manu. Later that night, after closing down the shop, Manvi sat at the counter with a leftover piece of cake. Word had spread like wildfire, not very uncommon in a village of that size, and the old regulars of the shop flocked in to offer their best wishes to Manvi for taking over the shop. Paradise Cafe. With her resignation letter already in the post office, she severed her own creation, and her heart sighed in contentment. The sweetness of her homecoming seemed to be overpowering over the cakes. So, we hope you liked that story enough to tempt you to subscribe. We encourage you to share it with anyone else you can think of that would like to hear our stories as well. But do not forget, it is the writers that make the stories, so please read them for yourself by clicking the link in the description. That'll mean the world to us. Thank you for your time, and we hope to see you with our next. In the meantime, remember, if you can't find what you're looking for, create it. Take care.